On Tuesday night's main event, full panel, myself, Jeremy, Ryan, and we had, a full team. Epic Mike, the Jobby Gamer had joined us. I don't know if Gothix had left by then. I think she did. Lofty, all these guys joined us, and we talked about this Lord of the Rings thing. And the point that we had brought up that I wanted to kind of expand upon and rather just bring up with this audience as opposed to just that one was what I appreciate from the Lord of the Rings fandom. Now, I don't ever, and I would never consider myself a part of the Lord of the Rings fandom. I know more than what the normie would know about it. I could say that, but I'm not as knowledgeable on that shit. And I never have pretended to be like I am with, like, let's say, Marvel or DC. But there are people that are colleagues of mine, I would consider them, that are very knowledgeable, and I love to, I watch their material to see what their take is because they have as much passion as I have about this stuff. The thing that I think separates the Lord of the Rings fandom is that there's more of, all right, let's compare and contrast. You have me with Marvel and DC. I'm a guy that I have mounds upon mounds of comic books that I've read over the years. And there are characters, I don't care how big, small, notable, or very notable, or not very notable by non-comic readers. I don't care. I've always talked about how the source material laid a foundation, and if at minimum you don't plan to honor it. And what that means by you're supposed to capture the essence of who that character is when they appear on the screen. There's no need for completely changing the character to make them nothing like who they are. You might as well just create another character if that's the case. But for Marvel and DC, there's a lot less me's than there are in comparison to Lord of the Rings. So whereas to me, you have this uber knowledgeable person that maybe not everybody gets a bent out of shape about Marvel being depicted or how Marvel was depicted in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. To me, that was the most criminal thing that I'd ever seen. In a comic book adaptation in the recent decade, what they did to Marvel in the Captain Marvel movie is one of the most fucking criminal things that I've ever seen. The thing about the Lord of the Rings fandom is that it seems to be a lot more of the folks that are like me that are core portions of the Lord of the Rings fandom. It's a very intellectual, a very smart, intelligent sort of fandom. And now this is why I think that, look, the Lord of the Rings original trilogy wasn't a direct one-by-one. And there were things that were not, let's say, part of, like when you look at Peter Jackson's, look at that movie, groups of movies that deviated from a lot. But come on, a lot of it is taking what happened in the books and trying to have that appear in a live action adaptation. And even then, I remember when that stuff first came out, it wasn't as connected as we are with social media now. But when that stuff came out, there were still people that had some issues with what was going on. And I love that you're seeing this backlash right now. And it's not the backlash per se that I love. It's that this is different. To Jeremy's point that he mentioned before on Tuesday night's main event, like, it's one thing for me to do a video and talk about this type of shit, but there's not a whole lot of me's out there. There are people that may look to me as a person that is knowledgeable on this stuff, but there's a lot of people that are like me, per se, in the Lord of the Rings fandom as far as being very, very knowledgeable. And I think that makes a bigger portion of that core fan base than it does with Marvel or DC. And it's like basically protecting the sanctity of like Tolkien's work. And I've always appreciated that from them. I think that with Marvel and DC, I think if you put it on scales, like Marvel DC is on the lower end of the bulk percentage of the people that consider themselves fans or part of the fandom are as knowledgeable, like knowing this shit like the back of the hand. And then there's Star Wars. So Star Wars, I'd say, has an even bigger portion of me's out there. I think Lord of the Rings has more than any of them. I think, in fact, I did a video talking about how I appreciate this with it to Star Wars. I appreciate it even more so with Lord of the Rings and what it is that mean. Now, it's funny seeing the differences. For example, this is what I love. I love YouTube for this reason. Remember, I put out a video talking about the Peacemaker thing and how James Gunn and And John Cena, he said that he wanted to study up on the character, and he was willing to study up on the character of Peacemaker. And then James Gunn told him don't fucking do that because he didn't want him to be knowledgeable on it because they were basically going to do their own fucking thing. And that would have kind of influenced him. And if he would have been knowledgeable on it and they knew, and they were doing whatever it is that they're doing, right? And it's funny seeing the reactions versus me with the Lord of the Rings or having this sort of elves or more so the dwarven princess or whatever the fuck she's supposed to be, who couldn't be anything further from what those types of characters are supposed to be depicted as. And it's acceptable there. Like with Lord of the Rings, it's like, yeah, this should be criticized, blah, blah, blah. With Peacemaker, it's like, some people, they excuse it more. That's the term that I like to use. They excuse it more when it happens with Marvel or DC than they do with Lord of the Rings. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that from that. I wish there was some consistency so I can even envy that fandom. I wish there was some fucking consistency. I mean, now I don't give a shit. I get DC, let DC and Marvel fail, whatever. I appreciate the consistency in that. And this is why I think that if there is to be a turning point or a big epic backfire, it will be Lord of the Rings. I don't know what it is that they're going to do with this upcoming. It doesn't look to be good. Seeing the people that are more knowledgeable on this, like my man's Neurotic, I love watching it. Same with Star Wars. Love watching videos. I appreciate that. I love watching videos of people that are more knowledgeable on this shit than I am. I'm not one of those assholes like some of you guys are who hate watch me that aren't as knowledgeable, and you get so bent out of shape because there is someone that's more knowledgeable on it and you look at that like it's a fucking attack. I don't do that. There are people that are way more knowledgeable about Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and shit, and I appreciate that from them. And I love to watch their material because I don't know much. I don't say I don't know much, but I don't know nearly as much as they are. And they give me a point of reference. They can kind of bridge that gap. And I appreciate that from them. But this is different. This is different. And there may be a backlash that they can't recover from, considering how much money Amazon and all of them put in, because they're dealing with a different beast. You're not dealing with Marvel and DC's cosplay stands. You're dealing with a more knowledgeable fan base that wants to protect Tolkien's work. And if you bastardize that, you're going to hear from them in great proportions because they expect more direct adaptations. Not direct as in it has to be a one-by-one, but more direct adaptations than what I think any other fan base expects in large. Like, not like, yeah, there's me and there's other creators that are in our space as well in the Marvel DC sense, but not like Lord of the Rings. Not like Lord of the Rings. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Is Lord of the Rings, I think it's dead on the rod as far as I'm concerned, but how is this going to turn out is going to be the most interesting, because this may be the wake-up call for Hollywood. Now, I prefer that they just go fucking run themselves into the ground. So if anything, it's going to be intriguing if that's exactly what they're going to do. But they've gone brand to brand to brand and said, hey, who gives a shit about source material? It has a name brand and it's recognized, and now it's tied to this mega corporate entity. Who cares? We'll mildly represent the way that I put it in Tuesday night's main event. Excuse me, K-Talk. But the way that I put it was that continuity, canon, the story, the lore, that's secondary to virtually all of these creators in these spaces now that now have control or rights to make adaptations based upon whatever brand it is. Secondary. Primary is a story that they wanted to tell. Secondary is that they're using these characters or brands that have already a built-in fan base to then tell those stories, no matter how much it deviates from it, because it's about themselves. Again, I talked about this with James Gunn, and what happened with he flat out, that's why I brought it up, because he flat out admitted it. It wasn't like me just sitting here yelling on YouTube saying that this is what they do. No, he was like, yeah, I didn't look it up. John Cena's like, I didn't look it up. I wanted to, but I didn't, because James Gunn told me not to fucking even give a shit about that. So again, they tell on themselves. They're pretty open about it. Hell, if you know anything about this stuff, and I've said the more knowledgeable you become about this stuff, the more it's like, yeah, kind of seems to hurt your enjoyment of it all. It's a lot more me's with Lord of the Rings. So I'll be interested to see what you guys think about this and how this is going to turn out. because they're dealing with a different beast here. I mean, people had their gripes about the original trilogy stuff. This right here could be something special in the sense of we look back at this moment and say that did it for so many people, because that was more untouchable. And I believe Chris, who passed away. When did he's like the last? I don't think he's the last. He's not the last one still alive, is he? It doesn't he have like a daughter or something? Tolkien has like I can't remember if it's a daughter or something that's alive still. However, Christopher died 2 years ago, and some people see that as and I could be wrong on that as far as like who else is still alive with this. But Christopher died in 2 years ago, and it seems that may have accelerated all of what's about to happen, going into this new era of Lord of the Rings. We'll see what happens, but let me know your thoughts on that. Shout out to that fandom for holding Hollywood and their fucking feet to the fire, and you're not just gonna sit here and just consume just for the sake of consuming. There will be people that do that, don't get me wrong, but a lot of y'all are more vocal with y'all's fandom, and I appreciate that. There's a lot that I think people can take into that going into the future with protecting their own properties when we talk about the parallel economy, that they can learn from Tolkien fandom and all of that, man. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. You just listened to a clip from my podcast, For Canon's Sake, which is live throughout the week at 12 p.m. Central on youtube.com/YoungRipper59 and odyssey.com/@YoungRipper59. Be sure to check out my website, ericdjuly.com, so you can stay up to date with everything it is that I'm doing. You can also become a member and get access to a bunch of cool perks and exclusive content, which includes a social media hub where you can interact with myself and other members. It even has an app that you can get, which is now live in the Google and Apple stores.